Hi guys, so we're back with another episode. We left off at the beginning of chapter 19. So before we begin, we're going to take a deep breath in and begin. Chapter 19, Totally Spies. That day, Seven, Thorn, and Valley huddled by the side of the entrance of the Ravensgill Hall of Elders and schemed. They each had on wigs, glasses, and what Seven could only describe as prairie-like dresses, courtesy of Thorn. "This wig is itchy," Valley said, scratching her head. "And we look like nerds." "Yes, well, rat beard wigs will do that sometimes," Thorn said. "We were in a pinch." Seven winced at the mention of rat beard. "Pretending I never heard that." "Okay," Valley said. "We're going to go in there, ask to see the town records of the meeting, and see what's what." 2 cuckoo attacks in 2 towns during a vote involving spares was fishy enough on its own, but 3 was a conspiracy. At least that's what Seven had told Valley and Thorn that morning when she shared her suspicions. "It's more than just the attack," Seven had said. "It's also the fact that the cuckoo was able to get past wards put in place by the Grand and Uncle. That there are no traces of a night beast ever arriving in Ravensgill except the cuckoos. There should have been traces, tracks, fallen trees, poops, not to mention the dead flowers that were enchanted to look alive. And then there's the untouched jellybean fish," Valley had added. "Exactly. Someone is using cuckoos to sabotage the vote on Amendment S, and it seems like someone is helping the night beast go undetected. I think it might be the same someone, whoever it is. We should be able to find out by reading the meeting records and seeing who is against spare rights." They had come up with the plan to disguise themselves and get the information from the Hall of Elders, and now they were putting that plan in motion. "But what if they say no?" Thorn asked. "They won't," Valley said. "It's public info. My dad gets stuff like that all the time." Seven and Thorn exchanged doubtful looks. "The thing is, your dad is on the hill. Not everybody gets the same treatment. We're Witchling spares," said Seven. "Oh," Valley's cheeks went red. "Don't feel bad. I just learned last week that there is no N in cemetery," said Thorn. "Wait," Valley said, opening her eyes wide. Seven burst out laughing. "Anyway," she said, "that's why we have the disguises. And if it doesn't work," Seven smirked and held up a small vial. "Las Veras potion will make them tell us the truth." "You're scary," Valley said. "Now you know how I felt. All right, if they say no, you two distract them while I pour a few drops of this in their mud bean juice. Older witches always drink mud bean juice at work." "Got it," Thorn nodded. The 3 witchlings went inside the ornate Hall of Elders, where all government business was handled and the council kept their records and held their meetings. It was one of the most beautiful buildings in Ravensgill, with onion domes and high spires that looked like they reached the clouds sometimes. There were large archways and intricate etchings that told the story of the 12 towns' origins. They followed the signs pointing them towards the Ravensgill record rooms. The Hall of Elders was run mostly by crones, the oldest witches in Ravensgill, but there was also a ghost, and a few fae folk who looked just like witches but were twice as tricky and had lovely pointy ears. Seven hoped for the ghosts. Ghosts were mostly friendly and less likely to see through their disguises than witches, since, weary from their alive days, they tended to pay less attention to the living. If they got a fae clerk, they'd be done for, like toast. "Follow me," Seven whispered, her straight blonde wig shining in the colorful light from the stained glass windows. A curly ginger Valley and a brunette Thorn nodded and followed Seven to the desk of a shiny blue see-through clerk. A ghost. Seven searched his desk, and sure enough, a cup of steaming liquid was right next to his workstation. "Flingo." As they approached, the ghost smiled at them. "Hello, Alaric," Seven said, peering at his slightly melted-looking name tag. "Hello. Have you come to file a complaint or observation?" A clipboard rose from the desk, ready to begin taking notes. Huh? The witchlings asked in unison. Silly me, we keep records of everything, and I mean absolutely everything. So, when there's something amiss during an impossible task, or you've made some sort of progress, we record it here, for posterity. In the olden days, we used to assign Hall of Elders employees to follow spares who would invoke the impossible task around and record everything they did, but that became too difficult. So now it's your responsibility to come to us. Didn't the Grand tell you? Oh, wait, maybe I was supposed to tell you. Alaric held one ghostly hand to his chest, a concerned look on his face as he stared into the distance as if he were trying to remember. We're not spares, said Thorn, horrified. Alaric blinked a bunch of times, twisting his mouth to the side in a poor attempt at being discreet. Of course you aren't. What can I help you with instead? He said, winking, like 12 times. Seven bit her lip. If the Hall of Elders held records of everything, even impossible tasks, maybe they would find new information about the cursed toads too. It was still bothering her that so little information was available about them, that they had been so easily forgotten. Alaric seemed to know who they were anyway. So much for the disguises. Seven took the chance. 2 things, Seven said. Valley and Thorn raised their eyebrows. 1, do you have any records about the cursed toads? The spares of 65? Seven's cheeks were hot as Alaric tried, unsuccessfully, to hold back an amused smirk. Definitely not a spare, he whispered. Unfortunately, those records were lost in the Great Fire of 65. I know a bit about it off the top of my head, but I'm not sure it would be very helpful or accurate. That was a fraught night for me. You see, Alaric touched his half-melted name tag, and Seven knew for sure he had died that night. Sorry, didn't mean to bring up your death day, she said. Alaric waved his hand and smiled. Don't worry about it. I'm used to it by now. Seven had thought just then something that had been bothering her. Alaric, do you remember their names? The cursed toads? Alaric stared off into the distance for a long while, then finally looked back at the witchlings. You know, it's the weirdest thing, but I can't seem to remember at all. The witchlings exchanged looks. What was the second thing you needed? Alaric asked. We're doing a school project on local government. Would we be able to see some records from a council meeting? Seven asked. Oh, sure, Alaric said cheerfully, swooping through his desk. Ghost perks. He floated towards a big open room with rows and rows of filing cabinets as the witchlings followed behind. What year were you looking for? We have the records archived in Mackle, of course, but there's nothing quite like seeing the old records up close. Gives you a real... Alaric shimmied his ghostly shoulders. Feel for the history, you know? Seven did not know, but she still nodded and smiled. I love history, Valley lied. Seven nodded at Valley and Thorn and then quietly backtracked a few toadstools to Alaric's desk. Valley and Thorn chatted happily as they followed Alaric into the archives room. Seven looked around to make sure nobody was looking and deftly put 2 drops of Last Fair's potion into the mud bean juice on his desk. She then ran to catch up with them and gave Valley a small thumbs up. Actually, we were hoping for something pretty recent, Valley said. Alaric stopped and turned around towards them, raising his eyebrows. Oh? Like, from a day ago? Thorn asked hopefully. Oh, Alaric said again, but this time he looked worried. I'm afraid that isn't possible. You see, we're still processing the data. Alaric's voice cracked. Even without the potion, Seven could tell he was lying. Can you tell us which dates are available? Valley asks. Of course! Alaric floated back towards and through his workstation. Now let's see. He began typing on the Mackle. We have any of the past 300 meetings right here, except for 1 2 days ago, he laughed nervously. When will those records be done? We really need them. We can wait, Seven said. Alaric loosened the collar of his ghost shirt, which, despite being see-through like the rest of him, was clearly bedazzled. You see, the records, Alaric picked up his mud bean juice. Yes, Yes, Seven thought, her eyes glued to the cup. Alaric brought it to his lips, and the witchlings leaned forward in anticipation. He put the cup down gently. I'm afraid they just won't be processed for a while. But I assure you, there are much more exciting meetings to peruse. There was a rousing one about toad race regulations just 2 weeks ago. If you're in the mood for something older, we can look at the disco dance-off of 78, or even the Great Fire of 65. We have options with a capital O. We really need the last council meeting records. We might fail if we don't get them. Thorn opened her eyes like a sad puppy dog. Wow, she can use her cuteness for evil, thought Seven. Alaric looked like he was going to faint, and Seven almost felt bad. But then his hand went to his mudbean juice, and all her focus went to the cup again. He brought his shaking hands up to his face, and again the witchlings leaned forward. Just as he was about to take a sip, Alaric put the cup down on the table dramatically and threw his head to the side. I can't lie. I've never been good at it. Oh dear, okay. A quick sneak peek, but no more. And you tell no one of this. Got it? Alaric raised one ghostly eyebrow. Got it, the witchling said in unison. Alaric pursed his lips and looked around before opening a drawer behind him with a skeleton key. Jonathan, I love your tie, he said to a fae who was filing something close by. The fae hitched an eyebrow and looked down. He was not wearing a tie. Rats! If Alaric didn't pull it together, he was going to give them away. The witchlings exchanged nervous glances as Jonathan meandered towards them, eyebrows hitched. Alaric took a few files from a folder in the drawer and switched them over to another so swiftly even Seven almost missed it. Jonathan picked up the pace and was nearly beside Alaric now. The ghost closed the drawer with his key and handed over a green folder, his ghost hands shaking slightly. There you go, little witches. That will explain everything you need to know about how your local government works, Alaric said a little too loudly. Jonathan stopped beside Alaric at the workstation and seemed to relax a bit at those words. Sheesh! Whatever was in those files must be something they really didn't want anyone to see. Thank you, Alaric, Thorn said. Haha, for what? I barely did a thing. Just gave you a packet of pre-made info. Good thing I thought to make those for the school kids. Jonathan smiled tightly and picked up Alaric's cup, sniffing it. Oh no, oh no, oh no. The fae brought it up to his lips and took a long, hard gulp. Seven's eyes went wide. Would the fae know it was enchanted? Would they go to the tombs? What was the penalty for something like this? Jonathan put the mug down and smiled. You know, at first I believed that project was quite useless, as you are sometimes quite useless, Alaric. But now I realize it was actually clever, Jonathan said, and he opened his eyes wide. Oops. Alaric looked madder than a toad on a hot lily pad. He grabbed the cup and threw the contents of it back, finishing it off and putting it down on the desk with a bang. Thank you, Alaric said with a wide smile. I am often underestimated, but I strive to prove warlocks like you wrong. Is that so? Well, did you know I am often envious of your bedazzled ghost clothing? As you should be. You wear the exact same utility pants every day. You are a fae, for rat's sake. Have some dignity. Let's get out of here, Valley said, and the witchlings took advantage of the truth fight and ran for it. The witchlings held on to their wigs as they hustled out of the Hall of Elders into the nearest mudbean shop. The Ravenskill mudbean house was on the bottom floor of a flat iron-shaped building. Big windows adorned 3 full walls, so you could sip your hot drink and use the nosy Nelly spell, Chisme, to observe your neighbors at the same time. The intricate molding on the copper ceiling sparkled in the afternoon sun, and the comforting smell of mudbean juice filled the air. The mudbean house was mostly empty at this time of day, as adult witches were busy at work and younger witches were still at school. Seven tried hard not to think about how much she missed school and getting the best grades in her class. She missed her teachers, and the smell of her old school books, and even the cafeteria food. There was no use in being sad about it now, though, Seven thought. Plus, there would be plenty of time to reach the top of their year again if they survived. But right now, they had a mystery to solve. Come on, There is a booth in the back I do my homework in sometimes, Seven said, and Thorn and Valley followed. I'm taking this thing off. It's itching like a chili pepper ant, Valley said, as they slid into the tall, seafoam green booth. She yanked her wig off and started to stuff it into her backpack. Gentle, Thorn said, an anxious edge to her voice. These wigs are premium rat beard. Thorn took off her wig and gently placed it alongside Seven's and Valley's and zipped it up in a hot pink bag with a hanger attached. She then folded the wig and placed it into her own rucksack carefully. Don't you think it's weird that Alaric can't remember the cursed toads' names? Not even the Grand can, Seven whispered conspiratorially. My mom either, said Valley. It's totally weird. Seven thought about the shush orders Tia had told them about. She had a suspicion, but she needed more info first before she could be sure. A barista witch slid up to their table. He had piercings in his nose and about 5 on each ear, cool braided hair, and lots of tattoos. He looked at the witchlings suspiciously. Didn't you have different hair when you walked in? Ha! Oh, that. Seven struggled for words. We just have weird winter hats, Thorn nodded. Got it, the barista winked. Can I get you something? Hot punches, extra bog mellows, and bat butter and toad jelly sandwiches? Seven looked at Thorn and Valley, who nodded enthusiastically. Coming right up, said the barista witch, before walking back to the counter to make their lunch. Okay, Seven said. First of all, excellent work back there. It was a close call. Can't believe Alaric cracked without even drinking the potion, Valley smirked. I hope we haven't caused an unmendable rift between co-workers, said Thorn, wearing the collar of her prairie dress. I'm sure they'll be fine. Let's read these papers before Jonathan comes looking for us, Seven said, taking the file from inside her cloak and placing it on the table. They shifted through the big pile of records Alaric had given them. Seven pulled a pack of neon markers from her bag and began to highlight furiously. After just a few minutes, she'd gone through all the pages. The barista brought them their food, and they sipped on their punch and ate sandwiches as they talked. Well, Valley asked impatiently. Okay, so as we know, Amendment S was supposed to be voted on last night, Seven said. They didn't get to the vote because of 2 things. 1, some members of the council kept objecting and trying to introduce counter amendments, and by the time they finally got everyone settled, they were alerted to the cuckoo attacks. They concluded the meeting abruptly around 9:30. Does it say who objected? Valley asked. Seven shook her head no. If the cuckoos were trying to stop the vote, why didn't they just attack the Hall of Elders? Asked Thorn, scratching her head. That place is fortified with really strong magic and is guarded by the Grand's Guard at night, especially during meetings. It would be harder for cuckoos to get in there than in a normal house, Valley said. Do we know who else they did attack? Thorn asked. I think the names are in the Squawking Crow article. Hold on. Seven pulled out her dragon scale notebook and read the names out. Aside from Perdita Elvenfoot and my house, there were attacks on the Grimsbane and Barlow families. I don't recognize those last names. Valley's face went whiter than usual. I do. Last summer, there was a thingy on the hill, and I had to help my mom make these name cards for the tables. We painted the little cards by hand and alphabetized them, so I remember their names. Those are people on the council. Holy rats, said Seven. Perdita isn't on the council. Her son is. Why wouldn't they just attack the council members themselves, though? Valley asked. When my family got attacked, we left Boggs Ferry because we were so scared. Maybe the cuckoos didn't want to hurt the council members. Maybe they just wanted to scare them, Thorn said. Seven snapped her fingers. Exactly. This all fits. It would be good to know if the council members' families were attacked in Boggs Ferry too. I can message Tia, Thorn blushed. She gave me her portaphone number. Thorn typed into her portaphone, and a few seconds later it lit up with a message from Tia. Thorn held it up so they could see. Yep, Tia's message read. All council family members. The 3 witchlings looked at one another, eyes wide. Someone really was working alongside the cuckoos and the night beast. I think whoever is working with the night beast brought it to the 12 towns specifically for this, Seven said, to try to stop spares from gaining more rights. She leaned back in her seat. Their impossible task had been to kill the night beast, but this was bigger than they'd ever imagined. There wasn't just a monster on the loose. There were witches working with it, working against them. If the only reason the night beast had come to Ravensgill in the first place was because of a witch, if they could find out who that witch was, maybe they could stop it. But who in the 12 towns would ever do something so heinous? And who could? Night beast didn't exactly bend to the will of witches. Seven couldn't think of any spell strong enough to make that happen. But then again, she didn't know every powerful spell. She was just a witchling. Whoever was behind all this was someone really powerful. Who has the most to lose by not having spares around to do their dirty work? Seven wondered aloud. Her cheeks went red, realizing what she'd just said, and what the answer was. Thankfully, Valley spoke before Seven even had to. It must be someone from the hill. Chapter 20. A Secret Potion. Thorn threw a rat tail into a cauldron between them and jumped back when the potion in progress squealed and turned green. Thorn and Seven had snuck into their school's potion room 5 days after their spy mission and were mixing ingredients together for a particularly volatile enchantment, a memory potion. The school was empty, as everyone had gone home for the day, and the potions room was filled with ingredients even Seven didn't have access to. Seven had heard from her parents the town council had rescheduled the vote on amendment as for tonight. They planned to attend. There, they could find a suspect among the council members opposing the bills, and with this potion, which would allow them to see their suspect's memories, they'd know for sure. She mixed the potion with a big wooden spoon as it bubbled and, horrifyingly, cackled softly. Roba Recuerdo's potions, like the one Seven was working on, grabbed a witch's memories from any item they'd recently worn. It wasn't super potent, and the memories might be muddled, but it would have to be enough. They would need to steal something from their suspect, then drop it into the cauldron with the potion. This is going to be real tricky, said Thorn, as she helped Seven stir the potion. I hope we can pull it off without getting turned into toads. No offense, Edgar. Thorn smiled at the toad, who was sitting in his little mushroom-shaped traveling tank atop the desk. Edgar turned around to face the wall in response. Seven laughed and turned back to the cauldron, stirring it as the potion bubbled. You know, there is a counterspell to this one, sort of. It makes you forget things, but it's super hard to do, and if you mess it up, you can set the subject on fire, Seven said. Magic is finicky that way. It doesn't always turn out how you mean it to. Thorn paused for a few moments. What if the whole thing, bringing the night beast here, was like a magic accident too then? It's hard to believe any witch would go that far just to hurt spares, Thorn said. Seven scoffed. You're too nice. Have you seen how they treat spares? Spares? We are the most vulnerable witches in this town because we don't have powerful magic. We can't protect ourselves against big threats. We're at a disadvantage, so they should help us because we're supposed to be a community, like we've been taught since we were littles. The same way we help make sure elderly witches are warm on the coldest winter nights, how we protect baby witches like Beefy. Spares are pushed to the side and not protected because people on the hill are more concerned with being able to treat their assistants like goose poop and to pay them only a handful of coins. They won't let go of that power, so we have to pay the price. We have more than enough magic and potions to help all Ravensgill residents live comfortably, but they just won't, for no good reason other than hate. I wouldn't put anything past witches like that. Thorn's eyes opened wide. Seven, you should write an article for the Squawking Crow about that. I think a lot of witches would agree with you. Seven's face went hot. I don't think they'd take a piece from me. I'm a spare. So what? You're smarter than any other witch I know, fancy coven or not. They'd be warlocks not to run something you wrote. Seven looked down. She was embarrassed and proud all at once, and she wondered, what if she still tried to write for her favorite newspaper? It wouldn't be the first time she ignored the rules and followed her heart. Why not with her biggest, most important dream? What are you goats talking about? Valley asked, walking into the room with a handful of toads from the toad tank. Injustices, Seven said, still angry. Thanks. Put them down over there. We just need some slime from their bodies to complete the potion. Edgar doesn't have enough. Seven eyed her toad, who was sitting happily in his travel tank, eating a ceramic dish full of spicy flies. Is this actually gonna work? Valley asked, wiping her hands on Seven's cloak. Hey, quit it, Seven protested. And we won't know till we try. Valley rolled her eyes, and Thorn caught her up on their conversation. If our theory is right, and a witch is helping the night beast, this is gonna be 20 times harder, Thorn said. No way. In my opinion, if we're right, this is good news. Our mission is to fell a night beast, right? So if the night beast is only attacking the town because witches are making it, and we find out who they are, maybe the Grand can get involved since she wouldn't be directly fighting the night beast. It means we maybe only have to stop a few witches as opposed to, a giant wolf monster that wants to eat my baby brother, Seven said. Thorn whispered at Seven through the side of her mouth. But what if it's Valley's dad? Seven shook her head and held a finger up to her lips, eyes wide with panic that Valley might hear. If it's my dad, we'll turn him in. It wouldn't be the first time he did something terrible, Valley said. Seven cringed, and the potion made a large poof sound before settling to a soft lilac color. Well, the potion is done. Let's pack up and head to the Hall of Elders. We have a traitor to catch. Chapter 21, Little Old Witchlings. If I stay an old lady, you're coming with me to Flingo night, Valley said. Deal, Seven held in a laugh. I play Flingo with Grandma Lilu every Friday night, Thorn said. Now both Valley and Seven devolved into laughter before shushing each other through fits of laughter and tears. All right, the spell is a little complicated, so give me a second, Seven laughed nervously. Valley rolled her eyes. Oh boy. Seven wiggled her arms and hands and rolled her head around like she was getting ready for a toad race. She was sweating in every conceivable place, even her butt. It was one thing to find spells in books she had no business reading in the level 5 section of the library. It was another to actually try those spells out. With only 5 days until they were toadified, though, she was willing to try anything, even this super complicated aging spell. It required a 2-sided hand mirror, which Seven had brought along for just the occasion. She pulled it from the inside pocket of her red cloak and took turns switching it from one hand to the other as she wiped the sweat from her palms. The mirror was her mother's. It was bronze and heavy, with intricate carvings, and Seven was pretty sure it was at least 200 years old. If she dropped it, she'd be dead. They would be sneaking into the Hall of Elders tonight to sit in on the council meeting and hopefully narrow down their list of night beast sidekicks. Seven took a deep breath. It's nearly 9 o'clock, Seven. People will begin arriving soon, Thorn said. Right. Okay, who wants to go first? Seven asked with a shaky laugh. Valley shook her head. Might as well be me. Perfect. Stand on the other side of the mirror. Closer. No, closer. Perfect. Now repeat the spell exactly as I say it, and when you do, you take the mirror. What happens if she doesn't? Thorn asked. I stay old forever. That, or I turn into Beefy's new play date, Valley said. Pretty much, Seven cringed. Then don't mess this up. I believe in you. Thorn gave her 2 thumbs up and said it so cheerfully, Seven knew she meant it sincerely. Seven cleared her throat, holding the mirror up between her and Valley as she intoned the dangerous level 5 spell. A spell that took witches years to perfect and that she, a witchling and a spare, was about to attempt. Here goes nothing. Bubble, bubble, boils and stubble, wrinkles triple, gray hairs double, Seven said, and Valley repeated perfectly as Seven handed the mirror over to her. Spots and backaches, creaky bones, make this young witch into a crone. The moment Valley repeated the second part of the spell, she doubled over with the mirror in hand, her hood going over her head and covering her face and hair. Valley, Thorn and Seven said, coming to either side of her. Valley's body shook, and Seven felt horrible. What if she'd bunged the spell? What if Valley's face was covered in blisters or something? Valley seemed to be sobbing now, and she made a high-pitched noise that sounded like wheezing. But when she straightened up and Seven saw her face, she was not crying. Valley was hysterically laughing. "I look like my own grandmother," Valley said, tears running down her face. "I have hair coming out of my ears and nose." She was in hysterics now. But more important, she was old, ancient even. And Seven was filled with a new sense of confidence. Although Seven realized, deflating just a bit, that Valley still sounded like a kid. She guessed the spell hadn't worked that well after all. "Your turn, Thorn," Seven said. They repeated the ritual, and Thorn turned into an adorable old lady, resembling Grandma Lilu down to the shiny silver hair. "I'll have to be careful if my maman is here tonight. She will think Grandma Lilu has taken a sudden interest in town politics," Thorn giggled. "My turn," Seven said, holding up the mirror and facing the side of the building so the other witchlings wouldn't get caught in the spell's crossfire and age even further. When Seven turned back around, she was a senior witch and her back really hurt. "Excellent. Now for our cloaks," Thorn said. "They were enchanted to change color and shape if we need them to. I added that particular spell in case we needed to make a quick getaway and disguise ourselves, but this seems like a good occasion too. There are 5 buttons of various colors on the inner right side of the cloak that all do different things. Press the black one and say Cambia, and the look of your garment will change," Thorn said. "Don't press the gold one though, whatever you do. It will make you hover on the wind and people will think you're flying." Seven's eyes opened wide. She'd have to remember that. She pressed the black button on the cloak and said, "Cambia," and her cloak changed from red to black. Pretty cool. The other 2 witchlings followed suit, and soon Valley was in a magenta cloak and Thorn in a mustard yellow. "We should enter separately, just in case," Valley said. "Good thinking," Thorn said. "Such a smart young lady." Her hand flew to her mouth, and all 3 witchlings cackled. "We should avoid talking at all costs. The vocal transformation component of the spell must have gotten messed up somehow," said Seven sheepishly. "Nobody is going to suspect us anyway, don't worry," Valley said, patting Seven on the back. "This spell shouldn't even be possible for us, but somehow you did it. You kicked Toad butt." Seven's old lady heart fluttered, and they made their way to the lower level of the hall, shuffling along as other Ravenskillians began to arrive. By the time they reached the basement, Seven was out of breath and ready for a nap. "Being old is tiring," she whispered to Thorn. "I really want to knit something with a warm cup of hot cocoa and watch cozy witch murder mystery shows on the telecast," Thorn said. "You always want to do that," Valley said as they found seats towards the back of the room. The basement was big, paneled in dark wood with a wine-red carpet and at least 100 folding chairs. Seven and Poppy would often help Miss Dewey set up for meetings there. Funny that until that moment, Seven had not thought of the Purple Coven or Poppy in a long time. The chairs were arranged around a podium at the far end of the room. That's where residents stood up and gave their 2 cents about things like goose poop cleanup solutions and more funding for the spec. Nobody cared when Seven lingered at the corners of those meetings, but there were some meetings where witchlings were absolutely never allowed, and tonight was one of them. It enraged Seven that even when a law or issue had to do with them, the simple fact of being young made them unqualified to have an opinion, even in their own fates. Ravenskillians filed into the warm basement. The room was filled with the smell of freshly baked goods, a cozy fireplace crackling, and the heavy perfumed flavor of some residents of the hill. Thorn appeared with a plate full of chocolate chip cookies and balanced 3 orange fizzy drinks in her spindly arms before handing them to Seven and Valley. "Thanks," Seven whispered. The seats around them began to fill up, and Seven chuckled nervously as a real grown-up witch slid into the seat next to her. Talus and Fox arrived, with Beefy in tow. They had been too nervous to leave him alone or with Mrs. Villalobos again after the cuckoo attack, and they thought Seven was at Thorn's house. They mercifully sat on the other side of the room, but they were facing Seven, which made her squirm in her seat a little. Thorn's mother walked in moments later, wearing an all-black suit and pointy green heels and looking like someone out of a movie. Valley's dad had also arrived at some point and was busy talking to the Dimblewits near the podium. Valley's mom was nowhere to be found. Valley leaned over and asked, "How long does this spell last anyway?" "It should last for 5 to 7 hours. Sweat trickled down Seven's forehead. "It should? What if it doesn't?" Valley asked in a heated whisper. "Then we run." Thorn smiled and looked out into the crowd, trying to disguise her panic, no doubt. Valley slumped back in her chair, and Seven reached behind Thorn and poked her in the shoulder. "Sit like an old lady," she whispered. Valley narrowed her eyes at her, but sat up a little straighter at least. The town grand swept into the room, and everyone seemed to find their seats and stop talking at once. That was the power that she had. Without even uttering a word, her presence was enough. The grand looked tired and maybe a bit angry, but prepared. The look of determination on her face could leave no doubt she came to this meeting to fight. The grand took her seat, and the gravel pounded on the podium on its own, and the little old witchlings perked up. The meeting was about to begin. First up to speak was Mr. Dimblewit, a witch of medium height but enormous of mustache. He had beady eyes and thin eyebrows, and it wasn't until he smiled at Mrs. Dimblewit, and it still looked like a frown, that Seven realized his face was just always sour, not to mention smug. "You remember what Mrs. Dimblewit said in your parents' bookshop the other day?" Seven whispered. "Oh, yeah! Didn't she say something about Mr. Dimblewit bringing up spares not being allowed in businesses or something in the next town meeting?" Thorn opened her eyes wide. "And then your mom said they'd been discussing terrible things at the town meetings. I bet you anything they have something to do with all this," Seven said, narrowing her eyes at the memory of Pixel being dragged through the snow. Mr. Dimblewit took the podium and shuffled papers in his hand, before clearing his throat and calling the meeting to order. "As you all know, we have just been struck by monster attacks. A child was almost taken," he said, shaking his head. Beefy, Seven thought angrily, as if he would care about the brother of a spare. "And one of our most cherished residents has been taken, not to mention, of course, the town uncle. The Grand," Mr. Dimblewit gestured to Knox, "found herself in need of meeting with the 12 Towns Council, which left Ravenshill completely vulnerable to attacks. And now we've learned the uncles from Boggs Ferry and Stormville have been taken as well. These attacks are spreading throughout the 12 towns." As the crowd began to murmur, the witchlings exchanged uncomfortable glances. What did any of this have to do with Amendment S? Mr. Dimblewit cleared his throat. It is no secret that the arrival of these monsters coincides with the invocation of the impossible task, something our town has not witnessed since 1965. It is our understanding that the town grant is hoping to open up dialogue about Amendment S this evening. Mr. Dimblewit chuckled softly. "Well, I do not think that there is anything more irresponsible than that. We are focusing on the wrong thing, giving our time, resources, and magic to witches who will never amount to much anyway, when our town is in grave danger. When our residents are being attacked, and are not even safe to walk home on their own, I can think of no worse thing." Again, the crowd began to talk. Some were nodding in agreement, and others, most of the crowd in fact, were looking at Mr. Dimblewit wearily or even angrily. Seven could see her father holding her mother's hand and whispering to her calmly. He was probably trying to convince her not to hex him. "It's got to be Mr. Dimblewit," whispered Valley. Seven nodded. If anyone was trying to keep spares down, it was this witch. This was their moment. Seven nodded at Thorn, who was the best at long-range spells, especially this one. Thorn nodded back and murmured, "Discozer," ever so quietly as she pointed one old lady finger at the buttons on Mr. Dimblewit's jacket. The spell whizzed right at the witch, and the thread holding one of his silver jacket buttons came undone. The jacket button tumbled onto the podium with a soft ping, and Mr. Dimblewit looked down, his cheeks turning red. He grabbed the button and stuffed it into his pocket. "Rats," seethed Valley. Mr. Dimblewit cleared his throat again and took off the ascot around his neck, putting it down on the chair beside the podium. "There," Seven whispered. "We have to grab his little scarf. The moment the meeting is over, we'll go for it." So we suggest that instead of this ill-timed amendment discussion, we instead talk about the proposition that my lovely wife and I, along with other members of the Hill Society, have put together. An amendment that would seek not to restore rights to spares, but to restore law and order to our fair town. A law that would require spares to be relocated and stripped of their magic in order to save Ravenskill from any further destruction. It is time we put Ravenskill first. Now almost everyone, including the 3 old lady witchlings, stood up in their seats and began to protest. You can't possibly do this. This is preposterous, barbaric. You're all a bunch of butt-toads. That last one was Valley. Seven's wrinkly hands were shaking. Did they really want to send them away? To take all their magic away? Wasn't it punishment enough to live as spares with lesser magic? And now they had to be far from their families too? Far from the place they'd always called home, but now felt more like a battlefield. How could her home not want her anymore? All for something she could not help. It was not Seven's fault she was a spare. It was nobody's fault. Mr. Dimblewit held his hands up, the smug smile spreading on his putty-like face as he tried to calm the audience down, but it was no use. All witches in attendance were arguing and yelling, and the room only grew louder and louder. The Grand stood up and said, "That will be quite enough." The crowd simmered back down to soft whispers. Mr. Dimblewit, please, continue, the Grand said. One extremely large vein in Mr. Dimblewit's forehead looked like it was about to explode as he gave the Grand a tight smile. He went on. Polypel Island has more than enough room to house all of Ravenskill's spares, or those of the entire 12 towns if they so choose. The beautiful land will be a wonderful home for young and old spares alike. And while they're there, we will have devised a fruitful work schedule to keep them entertained. Why, everyone from our cauldron to our potions bottles can be manufactured there. Several audience members shook their heads in disgust or spoke hotly among themselves. Polypel Island was a few hours north of Ravenskill, in the middle of the boggy Crone River. It housed an ancient castle as well as the tombs, where 12 towns criminals went to receive punishment. It was rare for a witch to be jailed. Only killings on a mass scale and uses of dangerous forbidden curses ever warranted it, and how some adults wanted to send spares to live on the same island with killer witches. I know what you're thinking, Mr. Dimblewit said, but what of the spares who are in the employ of the Hill? That is a simple enough solution. Any spare with a work voucher will be permitted to stay in Ravenskill provided they are working for a Hill Society family, and are, of course, not receiving compensation. The crowd began shouting once again. Mr. Dimblewit's face went red as he yelled above the audience. Compensation! Since they will not be manufacturing useful items on Polypel Island, and therefore costing us a pretty penny. Please, the sooner I finish, the sooner you can have your say, he continued as the audience once again quieted down. Lastly, as part of this new law, it should be noted that someone must pay for the havoc these spares and their little task have caused our town. Before the task, there were no attacks in Ravenskill. They likely not only brought this night beast on us, but are keeping any competent witches from stopping it, since doing so would mean interfering with impossible task magic. That isn't true, Seven seethed under her breath. The night beast was already there. Everyone knew that. They hadn't brought it to Ravenskill. How could he lie so boldly? Mr. Dimblewit smiled sadly, but Seven could see through it. He wasn't sad. He was enjoying every minute. And I think it is clear who is responsible for it all. The Grand is tasked with keeping Ravenskill safe, and I know that most of us in this room have not felt safe in the past month. Am I wrong? Nobody spoke up. Right. Then I propose that along with our new law, which we have lovingly named the Spare Sanction, Mr. Dimblewit took a deep breath, puffing his chest out as if to gather courage. We swiftly vote to send the Grand to the tombs. Instead of screaming this time, the room fell completely silent. Seven was in shock, as she suspected everyone around her was as well. Thorn grabbed her hand, and on the other side, Valley grabbed Thorn's. They sat there in silence, old lady hands clasped, and waited for whatever dreadful thing came next. Mr. Dimplewit looked very pleased indeed as he left the podium to sit back down with his foot bunion of a wife. The room erupted then. Ravensgillians shouted over one another at the Dimplewits. It was pure chaos. "Now's our chance," Seven said. The Witchlings got up and weaved through the crowd towards the front of the room. It had been less scary to fight a cuckoo, Seven thought. Her palms were sweaty, and she tried to keep an eye out to make sure nobody was watching her, without being obvious. The Dimplewits were on the other side of the room with Valley's dad. Thorn and Valley lingered near her, and Seven could almost feel the nervous energy coming from their direction. As naturally as she could, Seven grazed the top of the chair where Mr. Dimplewit's ascot was, and balled the scarf into her fist before stuffing it into the pocket of her robe. Her heart was beating so hard she could feel it in her throat. "Got it," Seven said, and in that very moment her robes began to shift. She looked at Valley, and she was shrinking. "Oh no," Seven said. "The spell, it's wearing off," Thorn whispered desperately. "We have to get out of here. Come on," Valley muttered, her face almost completely back to normal already. Thankfully, the audience was still arguing heatedly among themselves, so nobody seemed to notice as they scrambled towards the door. They were going to get away with it. They were almost out when Mr. Pepperhorn stepped in their path. "And what is this, young lady?" Mr. Pepperhorn sneered at them and grabbed Valley roughly by the arm, shaking her until her hood slipped off. "Stop it!" Seven yelled, and the crowd turned to look just as the Witchlings' crone disguises melted away completely and their true forms were revealed. "Observe," Mr. Pepperhorn said, dragging Valley to the front of the room. "No! Let her go!" Thorn ran after them and pulled on Mr. Pepperhorn's black blazer, but he did not even seem to notice her. Tallis and Fox met Seven's eyes before running to her. Fox put her hand on her shoulders. "Stay by us. You too, Thorn." "Witchlings! Mere spares, using a dangerous level 5 enchantment." Mr. Pepperhorn reached the front of the room and gestured at his own daughter and then at Thorn and Seven with disgust. "What better proof can there be for, at the very least, the temporary holding of the Grand on Pullapel Island until we get this town back under control? Something like this has never occurred in my lifetime. The town Grand has been an adequate, if flawed, leader for many years, but perhaps she is past her prime," he said. "This blatant use of high-level magic by incompetent witchlings is basis for a sentence to the tombs for these spares. Either the witchlings go or the Grand does. There can be no other alternative." Before the crowd could even begin debating again, the Grand stood up. "There is no need for a fight over this. I will willingly go to Pullapel Island and await trial if that is what the council chooses. But please be aware, this will be decided by the 12 Towns Council, not the Hill Society. No matter how much you wish it would be." The Grand raised her chin up. The gravel hit the podium 3 times, and Mr. Pepperhorn called for a vote. "Everyone in favor of sending Nox Cosmos to the tombs, say aye." Mr. Pepperhorn looked at the council members expectantly, and he, along with Mr. Dimplewit and 3 other witches from the hill, voted to send her away. "All opposed?" Seven's parents, Thorn's mother, and 1 other witch on the council voted against sending the Grand to the tombs. 5 votes in favor of arresting the Grand, 4 against. She was going to be taken away. "Wait, aren't there supposed to be 12 members of the Ravensgill Council?" Thorn asked. "Yeah, guess which 3 are missing," Seven said. "Maddox Grimsbane, Apple Barlow, and Onyx Elvenfoot, the 3 witches whose families were attacked by cuckoos. They hadn't come tonight." "He planned this," Seven seethed. Mr. Pepperhorn gestured to 2 of the Hill's private security officers, who rushed over to put large iron cuffs on the Grand's wrists. "You cannot do this," Mrs. LaRue yelled, but it was too late. "Mom, Dad, we have to stop them," Seven said, looking at her parents in desperation. "Right now we can't. They watched the 3 of you break a high law in real time. It's technically the Grand's responsibility to keep such things from happening. She does not have a choice but to go, at least for now," Fox said. The Grand walked, head high towards the exit. Mr. Pepperhorn's security grabbed her wrist tightly, but when they reached Seven and Thorn, the Grand stopped. "This is not your fault, I promise you. They were going to find a way to do this no matter what." "No talking, let's go," said one of the guards. "I can still make the bunions on your feet grow to the size of boulders," the Grand said, and the guard's eyes went wide with fear. "Seven, it is up to the three of you now." "We're only witchlings, spare witchlings," Seven said. The Grand struggled against the security until she was able to get closer to Seven and whispered, Do you think they would be this scared if you were only anything? You are capable of so much more than you know. Stick together, remember." The guards pulled the Grand up roughly, and the room descended into chaos once again. Shouts of indignation of "You can't do this to the Grand" were met with dueling "It's for your own good" or "It's what she deserves." Talus, Fox, Thimble, and Leaf all tried to calm them down, to reason with Dimplewitz or his guards. But Seven had her eyes on one person, Valley. Mr. Pepperhorn was dragging Valley down the aisle to the door, handling her as if she were a rag doll. Valley's face was splotchy and red and streaked with tears as she struggled against her dad. Seven ran, standing directly in their path, fists clenched in anger. She would use a spell on him even if it meant she had to go to the tombs as well. "Stop being so awful to her, you warlock," Seven yelled. Mr. Pepperhorn only sneered. "I should never have let this go on as long as I did. Valley will not be seeing either you or that Thorn Witchling ever again. She is hereby withdrawn from the impossible task and will work in my employ instead. A marvelous loophole created by yours truly because, you see," he leaned closer to Seven, a smug smile on his face, "when you control the magic, you control the town. The impossible task is only as binding and powerful as the witches enforcing it. That's something you didn't read in your little books, did you? When the night beast devours you two, I will be sure to send only the most expensive of flowers to your graves." He yanked Valley roughly and stood up. But when he did, there was something standing behind him, and he came face to face with Talus Salazar. "You let Valley go, now." Mr. Pepperhorn laughed. "Or what? You will report me to the magical insurance police? Useless witch." He flicked his hand at Talus and set a stream of fire at him. Seven's dad wasn't expecting it, but diffused the fire with his own stream of calming magic. Seven opened her eyes wide. She had never seen her father in actual combat before. "That is your problem, Salazar. Unwilling to do what is necessary to win a fight." Mr. Pepperhorn shoved Valley aside and threw his hands up at Seven's dad. "Veneno!" Seven screamed as the magical poison snaked its way toward her father's chest. Quicker than lightning, her mother appeared, her long red curls whipping around her as Fox grabbed Seven's cape off her with ease and precision and used it to block the spell. Her cape, Seven realized, her breath coming in fits and starts, was poison. Her cape, Seven realized, her breath coming in fits and starts, was poison-proof thanks to Thorn. Beefy was safely on the other side of the room, sitting on Mrs. Villalobos' lap. The few residents not too busy fighting to notice gasped or tried to apprehend Mr. Pepperhorn. But he already had his own security detail pushing them back. It was illegal to use that kind of magic against another witch, but there was nobody to report them to. The Hill Society always did what they wanted, but now it would truly be without consequences. Now everyone in Ravenskill was at their mercy. "You have no right to do this, any of it," Seven's mother said, her eyes narrowed at Mr. Pepperhorn. "And who," he paused, smiling wickedly, "is going to stop me?" Seven felt the ascot in her pocket, wondering if maybe they had not suspected the wrong witch. Could Mr. Pepperhorn be evil enough to be using the cuckoos against the town? Everything was messed up, a bigger mess than before, and she felt all mixed up with fear and anger. Seven's heart shattered as she watched Mr. Pepperhorn grab Valley and storm out of the room. Yes, she thought, he was. He's right, Thorn said through her tears. There's nobody who can stop him now. Yeah, there is somebody. Seven turned to Thorn, fire in her gaze as she opened her hand to reveal the button she had taken from Mr. Pepperhorn's jacket while he was busy berating them. Us. And I'm going to stop here. We'll begin at chapter 22 in the next video.